I was wondering what your strategy is for ensuring your personal mental clarity and long-term health and security, like yoga or goji berries.
I'm probably not engaging in a set of actions likely to maximize my lifespan. Yeah. I don't know. I do think at this time, I'm in all the history of Tesla, this is the most excited I've actually been about the future of the company, and I think that sort of excitement is just a powerful driver and makes me want to get up in the morning and come to work. I think it's incredibly important that you have an environment in general where people look forward to coming to work, because it's just so much easier to work hard if you love what you're doing. The stuff I was saying about building the machine that builds the machine, I'm just really fired up about that. And I think it's one of those things where so much more is possible than people realize. And so I think we're really going to positively surprise people there. I'm really excited about spending time on that, and JV is, and the rest of the team are. So I think, I'm feeling pretty fired up, actually. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
You can't fake enthusiasm. It's like the thing that you'd want to do if you didn't need to work. For me, it was wash cars, and people were like, "You want to wash cars for fun?" And I was like, "Yeah." Ammo NYC is a company I founded in 2011. I manufacture car cleaning supplies for very, very particular type of people. In any given week, I do between anywhere from 5 million to probably just shy of 20 million cars. Last week I did a $12.2 million car, just one of them. When I got out of college, I was obsessed with being successful, whatever that means. I worked on the New York Mercantile Exchange as an assistant trader, trading natural gas commodities. Getting in the Mercantile Exchange was like, I've made it. And then for me to decide later on that that's not what I wanted to do, I wanted to wash cars, that sort of transition was challenging. And I thought being a trader, meaning becoming wealthy or making enough money, I could buy all these beautiful cars. As it turns out, I just really wanted to be around them. So I went to go work for a place that prepared cars for the movies. And I learned a lot about how to deal with very rare and vintage cars, how to drive them, and specifically how to maintain them. It was a dream job. So from there, I kind of said, hey, I want to do this on my own on a bigger scale. The first big time client I had was a CEO of a clothing company. It was an Aston Martin Vantage. It was silver. He was the father of one of my friends. It was nice to get my first shot. And then from there, what I did was I took a lot of pictures of the cars that I did. And so when somebody came into the shop, you could see like, oh my gosh, he's been trusted by this many people to do this many cars. And then it just sort of steamrolls, but it does take time. Joe, you want to see this after one pass? Why you're the guy, dude? I don't have commercials. I'm not in any magazines. I do things like they're called ride-along. Today's video, how to remove a clear bra by yourself. A few techniques and things that you need to think about. I think people really jumped onto that and they said it's exciting and cool or whatever, but I'm teaching them. I hosted a bunch of different shows on the Drive channel, Autoblog, and of course my YouTube channel, which is, by the way, the #1 car care cleaning YouTube channel. I'm guessing that's why the company grew as fast as it did. I think what's cool about cars, it equalizes people. You could be a billionaire, you could be broke, it doesn't matter. It's like the cars always bring you together. It's more than just like the wow, look at me factor. I'm driving a yellow Lamborghini or purple Porsche, whatever. There's more to it than that.
Speeches against price and wage control than Richard Nixon did. Nobody in this country was a stronger anti-communist than Richard Nixon was. Upon being elected as president, he makes a trip to China, an entente with communist China, and he proceeds to impose price and wage control. Here is his successor, Jerry Ford, a splendid congressman, a fine man, a man firmly in favor of a free enterprise system. As president, he signs a bill continuing price controls on oil. That's when he lost me. Now, so I say to you, I think that the issue is not a partisan issue. We will not solve our problem by electing the right people. We will only solve our problem by making it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. And the good thing he did was to close the gold window, to end the attempt by the U.S. to maintain a price of $35 an ounce on gold, which also had the effect of ending the fixed exchange rates between the dollar and other currencies. Now, so long as we have a freely floating exchange rate, there is nothing of less significance in the balance of payments. The market will fix it. If we are buying more goods abroad than people want to buy from us, then foreigners are accumulating dollars. Then what will they do with those dollars? They will try to buy their own currencies. In the process, they will bid the price of their own currencies up. The effect of that will be to make their goods more expensive to us, and our goods cheaper to them, and that will restore balance.
So what you're saying is that the problems are caused when governments go contrary to natural laws.
Well, no, let's not say that. Let's not put it that way. That makes it too easy, because we don't really know what these natural laws are. The problems are caused when government acts in a bad way, in a way that specifically distorts the incentives and the opportunities open to people, because there is a real room for government. We need government. We need government to do the right things. And now we have to examine and analyze what are the right things to do. We need government to protect one man from being hit over the head by another man. The great tragedy of the modern era and of the expansion of government, in my opinion, is that as government has increasingly been doing things it has no business doing, it's been doing the things it ought to do less well. Yes, it does. But there's a big difference. Quite a difference. See, I don't have any objection to Madison Avenue tactics. I think advertising serves a very useful function, so long as it's competitive. I think it's fine for me to be able to talk to you as long as other people can talk to you and you can hear other views and you can make up your mind. I have no objection to individuals in their private capacity getting up on platforms as I'm getting up on this one to try to persuade people to one view or another. Intelligent enough to choose among alternative purveyors of supposed truth. The problem is a one-sidedness. We believe the whole justification for free press, for free speech, for our whole system of adversary justice, the whole justification is that people will be best able to distinguish truth from falsity if they have an opportunity to hear a variety of different opinions. Now, if you only have one opinion spoken, to shift grounds, if we go to the Soviet Union, the people in the Soviet Union are enormously skeptical about what they hear from their government. But they cannot know the truth because they don't hear it. They have to conjecture what is the truth because they only hear one side. They don't believe that. Don't misunderstand me. They become experts at reading between the lines. But they still don't have access to the full variety of opinion which would enable them to choose and decide intelligently and reasonably about what's right. So let's by all means have a clash of opinion. Let different beliefs clash in the marketplace of ideas. But let's not have a monopoly or a subsidization of one brand of ideas versus another.
Yes, so you mentioned about the imports of steel.
Yes.
I'd like to allude to that. We hear from the American steel industry that in Japan, for instance, steel producers are producing at less than cost with support of the government so as to keep employment up there. And as a result, the American steel industry here is not going to be able to compete. So they're going to shut down and we're going to have higher unemployment here. What is your answer to that?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a very easy answer. Because I may say the answer I'm giving is not my answer. It was the answer that was given by Adam Smith, the man whose face appears on my tie, I may say. It was given by Adam Smith in 1776 in The Wealth of Nations. From that time to this, hardly any professional economist has believed in tariffs or protection or anything but free trade. But the answer is very straightforward. Let us suppose for a moment that the Japanese flood us with steel. That will reduce employment in the American steel industry, no doubt. However, it will increase employment elsewhere in America. We will pay for that steel with dollars. What will the Japanese do with the dollars they get for the steel? They aren't going to burn them. They aren't going to tear them up. If they would, that would be best of all. Because there's nothing we can produce more cheaply than green pieces of paper. And if they were willing to send us steel and just take back green pieces of paper, I can't imagine a better deal. But they're not going to do that. They're not stupid. They're smart people. They're going to use those dollars to buy goods and services. They're going to spend them. In the process of spending them, they may spend them directly in the United States, and that directly provides employment in the United States. They may spend them in Brazil or in Germany or in China or anywhere else. But whoever gets them in turn is going to spend them. So the dollars that we spend for the steel will find their way back to the U.S. as demand for U.S. goods and services. You will have less employment in the steel industry. You will have more employment in the industries producing the goods we export. Overall, total employment will not be affected. But overall, the American consumer will be benefited because he will get the steel more cheaply and the goods made from the steel more cheaply than he otherwise would. That's the benefit to the American consumer. Now, why is the steel industry and similar industries, why are they so effective in their campaigns for protection? Because of a very common problem that affects not only this but lots else, and that is the difference between the visible and the invisible. The people who are going to lose their jobs in steel are very visible. They're a collective group. You can name their names. Suppose we restrict imports from Japan. Then people are going to lose their jobs in these export industries. They will be widely spread over the country. You and I couldn't name one person. But that doesn't mean they're any less real. But the greater propaganda effect of the steel industry is because you can set the visible is a more potent political force than the invisible people who will lose their jobs. I urge on those people who think there's some sense to the steel industry argument to consider it in a more absurd setting. You very often bring out the logic of an argument by carrying it to an extreme. You know, you could have a great employment in the city of Logan, Utah, of people growing bananas in hothouses. If we had a high enough tariff on the import of bananas, it could become profitable to build hothouses and grow bananas in those hothouses. That would give employment. Would that be a sensible thing to do? If that isn't sensible, then neither is it sensible to artificially restrict the import of steel. Now, with respect to the charge that the Japanese government is subsidizing the export of steel, number one, is very dubious that it's true, but suppose it were true. Then that would be a foolish thing for the Japanese to do from their own point of view. But why should we object to their giving us foreign aid? We've given them quite a bit. Thank you. You see, I think there's been one underlying basic fallacy in this whole set of Social Security and welfare measures. And that is the fallacy, this is at the bottom of it, the fallacy that it is feasible and possible to do good with other people's money. Now, you see, that view has two flaws. If I'm going to do good with other people's money, I first have to take it away from them. That means that the welfare state philosophy of doing good with other people's money, at its very bottom, is a philosophy of violence and coercion. It's against freedom, because I have to use force to get the money. In the second place, very few people spend other people's money as carefully as they spend their own. Let me take this down to the situation in New York City right now. About 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, I've forgotten when it was, John Kenneth Galbraith, in an article he wrote in the New York Times magazine section, said, there are no problems in New York City that would not be solved if the New York City budget were twice what it is now. Now, the New York City budget has since then something like tripled, and all the problems are worse. Why? Because the fact is that it's a confusion to identify the city with the people. The New York City's budget is higher, but that means that the people of New York have less to spend. It's only been transferred from people individually to the city. Now, who spends the money more carefully? The city civil servants or people who are spending their own money? Now, of course, you may say to me, but when the city spends the money, it'll go for the good things, and so even half of it is wasted, it's better off. But that's nonsense. City civil servants and others are just like the rest of us. We're all of us interested in pursuing our own objectives. The label, again, on the bottle may be welfare or health or education, but you have to look at all of the places where it drops off en route to going there. There are lots of other things that can be accomplished under those titles, and the fact is that no larger a fraction of the money that the city spends goes to good things. Let me illustrate in a very concrete way. A major problem in New York City is housing. Why? Because of bad governmental policy. Rent control, which was continued in New York after World War II, in the only city in the country where it was continued, everywhere else it was dropped. It has caused enormous abandonment of houses, eroding the tax base. Public housing, governmental subsidy to housing, so that people who occupy it have no incentive to maintain it. If you had eliminated the government from the housing market and left that money in the hands of the people themselves, the housing situation in New York today would be far better than it is.
Is it so totally unfair to say that we didn't live in a paradise even before the mismanagement that you claim brings about the Depression?
We didn't live in a paradise, but there is no period in human history in which the ordinary man had as great an improvement in his lot in life as in the 19th century in the United States when the government was of trivial importance.
Then what accounted for the movements, the very strong and positive movements to bring about governmental action?
What accounted for those movements, those were fundamentally intellectual movements. They originated primarily in Britain and elsewhere. What accounted for them, I think, is a complicated story. I won't profess to give a whole answer, but I think the important part of the answer is that it's a natural human tendency to take for granted the good things that happen and to regard as the workings of the devil the bad things. And that if a bad thing comes along, you say, we ought to pass a law and do something about it. That's a very natural human tendency. I think the remarkable thing, the thing that needs to be explained, is not why we've had a movement toward collectivism and toward more government control, because that's been the natural state of mankind for thousands of years. The remarkable thing, in my opinion, from an intellectual point of view, is how you ever managed to get a century or a century and a half in which the dominant philosophy was the opposite. That's the exception, but it's not the normal natural state. Suppose you will take a broad view of history for a moment and of geography. You cannot find a date in history at which the greater part of the human race was not living in a condition of tyranny and misery and dictatorship. Take it right now. The bulk of the human race is not living in a free world. The bulk of the human race is living in totalitarian or dictatorial governments. Can you name any date in history in which that wasn't true? Now, more extreme. Take any place in geography. Put your finger on the globe and go back over time. I don't believe there's a place where you can put your finger on the globe where mankind has, for most of human history, lived except in tyranny and misery. You had a few brief occasions. Greece in the 5th century B.C. And even there it's mixed because you had a slave society. It was a free society for the upper classes, not for the community. You had a brief period during the Renaissance in Italy. And then you have the latter part of the 18th and the 19th century, mostly the 19th century, first part of the 20th century. Those are the exceptions, not the rule.
Then you're the one who seems to want to interfere with the natural order.
Absolutely, I do.
Then why do we call you a conservative?
Because I'm not. Because I'm a liberal. I want people to take thought about their condition and to recognize that the maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing. And it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding
that if you step in to try to do them, you not only may make them, to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere. You know, another answer to your question as to why you seem to have the drift to collectivism is along these lines. The argument for collectivism, for government doing something, is simple. Anybody can understand it. If there's something wrong, pass along. If somebody is in trouble, get Mr. X to help him out. The argument for voluntary cooperation for a free market is not nearly so simple. It says, you know, if you allow people to cooperate voluntarily and don't interfere with them, indirectly through the operation of the market, they will improve matters more than you can improve it directly by appointing somebody. That's a subtle argument, and it's hard for people to understand. And moreover, people think that when you argue that way, you're arguing for selfishness, for greed. That's utter nonsense. The people who are in positions of power in a political hierarchy are also selfish and greedy. Mankind is selfish and greedy. And one of the interesting features about the 19th century that we were talking about, I wonder if you realize that there is no century in human history in which charitable and eleemosynary activity has been as widespread and on as large a scale as it was in the 19th century.
Yes, but it interests me that you just said mankind is selfish and greedy, and that has always been the battle cry of those who have said, therefore, we must impose controls upon them.
Therefore, we have to put power in the hands of other selfish and greedy men. Now, I want to apologize for what I said. The great bulk of mankind. There are always conspicuous exceptions, not everybody. And also, for each person, there's an exception. People are selfish and greedy in one aspect of their activity. They are unselfish and generous in another.
No, I understand
so
that.
But I don't mean to be making a...
I understand, but again, that is the philosophic basis of the argument that government must step in.
But it's a false argument, because it assumes somehow that government is a way in which you put unselfish and ungreedy men in charge of selfish and greedy men. But government is an institution whereby the people who have the greatest drive to get power over their fellow men get in a position of controlling them. Look at the record of government. Where are these philosopher kings that Plato supposedly was trying to develop?
Limited to that Athens you were talking about.
Right. Well, they never got power there, or they wouldn't have been philosopher kings either. Acton, Lord Acton, of course, made his famous comment, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that I do not believe that that argument will, that base will sustain the conclusion. There is a balance, you're quite right. I am not in favor of eliminating government entirely. I think government is growing all out of proportion to its scope.
But I think the lesson here for people thinking about creating companies is that even though, even if your company starts off based on things that are, completely untrue, that you don't know about, what really matters is adapting, is recognizing the mistakes and adapting quickly, and kind of fixing the sort of the false premises upon which the company was founded. That's what really matters, for people that thinking about creating companies. Just you got to adapt quickly, acknowledge and recognize your mistakes.
So we were like, oh no, we need to charge the car. And it was actually doing this. It had this problem. It was a bug at the time. It was doing this self-destruct thing where it was running. It was running the compressor to cool the battery.
Full disclosure, sort of.
Exactly. Even though it was the end of the state of charge, didn't make any sense. We were like, oh, we gotta get it on charge. So we ended up unplugging the compressor cable and charging it, backfeeding through the DC connection of the compressor. But it was a very successful drive, all said. And digital became the plan of record. I flew out to Hethel with some other folks from the team to retrofit all the EPs with...
Hethel is Lotus. That's
yes.
Lotus's headquarters in England.
Yes. Yeah. So flew out there. We retrofitted everything to full digital. And then we started developing digital traction control, all the pedal feel that everybody still has in their cars today. That all came together for Roadster back then. And it was a ton of fun.
Yeah. In fact, I remember in the early days giving a test drive to Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who I've known for a long time, and there was some bug in the system, and And damn it, and like the car would only go 10 miles an hour. It's like, look, I swear, guys, it goes way faster than this. Anyway, but they were kind enough to put a little investment into the company nonetheless, despite the world's worst demo.
But yeah, that's the digital motor controls story. It was this team of like 5 engineers, and we worked in a tiny little power cube for 3 months and got to the bottom of that problem and solved it. And we still build on the leverage of that technology today with all the cars that we have on the road.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing what we could do with small teams and pretty tiny budgets. When we had this incredible focus, every single thing was just solve this problem or else. Yep. So.
And that was another thing we learned, right? You can't just take AC propulsion technology and expect it to work. So we really wanted to get the heart of the machine, the heart of the car, into our IP, our code, and this was an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially, when I say like the company was founded on 2 false premises. One was that you could easily modify an existing gasoline sports car to be electric, totally false. And the other was that we would be able to use the AC propulsion technology that we'd licensed for a production vehicle, also totally false. They'd done some great technology that worked well on prototype cars, but basically did not work at all well for a production vehicle. So anyway, but I think the lesson here for people thinking about creating companies is that even though even if your company starts off based on things that are completely untrue that you don't know about. What really matters is adapting, is recognizing the mistakes and adapting quickly, and kind of fixing the sort of the false premises upon which the company was founded. That's what really matters, for people that thinking about creating companies. Just you got to adapt quickly, acknowledge and recognize your mistakes.
Wanted to take the greatest injustice in the world, something that we could make a huge difference in, and that's health. Now we broadened that a bit by doing agriculture and sanitation and some other things. And then we wanted to take a cause that would help the U.S. Be as strong as it could, and in that case, trying to help improve educational opportunity is our big thing.
You and Melinda go into the field. Why do you feel you need to go into the field in Africa or Latin America, any part of the world where you're giving away money, and actually meet people that you're giving money to and learn?
Well, I've chosen to spend my time, and Melinda spends her time, building the foundation as an institution that really has an impact. And I get a lot of enjoyment. This is how I've taken everything I've learned from Microsoft and the position I'm in, and helping to drive the strategy and go out and see what's going on with this work. That's my full-time job, and it's a wonderful job.
Your foundation has a certain life. It's not a perpetual foundation. Is it, I think, is it 20 years after either you or your wife, the last one to live, dies, that it would end? Is that how it works?
That's right. The way that we're managing the institution and keeping it excellent and designing it to solve problems that can be totally solved. So we work on malaria. This foundation should be able to participate in getting rid of that. All these infectious diseases that so disproportionately hurt the poor and really explain most of the difference between why a poor child has a 50 times greater chance of dying than a child in a wealthy country. In 30 or 40 years, those problems should have been brought to an end. And whatever the new problems philanthropy should go after, the people who were alive then and picking great executives and building institutions to go solve, they'll do a much better job than we can just writing down a little guidance. So it is a limited time foundation. And I love school. I mean, I loved it when I was there, and even now I read more textbooks, and so it's kind of ironic that I'm a dropout because I read more. I like to learn as much as anyone I know.
Yeah. Your early days, you described yourself as a nightmare boss. Those are your words, not mine. Was your work ethic just very different to everybody else's?
I was fanatical in my 20s, helping Microsoft lead the way in software was the only thing that I really focused on. So, I worked weekends, I didn't believe in vacation, and so I really pushed people to work hard. And I was still learning how to manage people, particularly the different skill sets, the sales people, the accounting people. And so, I fortunately, I think I'm a little bit better now.
We're really increasingly excited about the potential for Tesla Energy, and we think, previously I'd said that the battery pack allocation would be roughly 2/3 vehicle, 1/3 stationary storage. I'm actually at this point, I think it's probably going to be closer to even. Because the interesting thing about the Powerwall and the Powerpack is that they scale on a global basis a lot faster than cars do. Because when you have cars, you've got to deal with the regulatory regime in a wide range of countries, and most countries have like a very specialized regulatory regime, and you're dealing with entrenched competitors, and it's quite a difficult battle. Whereas for stationary storage, there's really no one's really, at least yet, doing it right, and the regulations are much more consistent from country to country, and the scaling potential is going to be quite a lot more than cars. I think the rate of growth is going to be several times that of the car side of Tesla.
Those same things.
I've read their tax plans. I think that at the end of the day, neither one of the plans have much to do with job creation, frankly. I actually probably am a little less convinced that federal government action or local government action has anything to do with job creation. I think job creation comes out of productivity gains, which comes out of innovation.
Concern you to the point of a possible recession in the near term?
No, I don't. I can't predict recessions. And if you guaranteed me there would be a recession next year, I would be buying and selling the same securities I'm buying and selling today.
Who's winning in this economy right now?
The rich. Guys like me. We have gone from having 93 billion, top 400, in 1982 to having 2.4 trillion, 25 for 1. People who, it becomes a more and more specialized market economy. It was an agrarian economy a couple hundred years ago. It's very hard, to get 20 times the wealth of the next guy because you were a little bit better farmer. But if you're better at some skills now, you can become incredibly wealthy at a very young age, not because you earned the money to build one steel mill and then saved it to buy another steel mill. So you get the capitalized value of an idea. And so the wealth moves big time, even on an anticipatory basis. And that has become more accentuated in the last 30 years.
The income inequality continues to grow and to
Absolutely.
grow and to grow. And the big question is, what are the societal and social impacts of that?
Well, you may have seen it in the election.
I think, yes. And look at the rise of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, Bernie
Sanders. A billionaire. Why is it not working for more young people?
Because the market system does get more and more specialized as we go along. In other words, if you were, I'm going to use IQ, and I know the limitations of it, but I'm going to use it just as a marker for a bigger idea. If you were 130 IQ working on a farm and the person next to you was a 90 IQ, the other person probably was worth 90% as much as you. It just didn't make that. There weren't any tools available. You didn't have to do planning or anything like that. It was, those were agrarian. That was an agrarian society. Then we moved into a manufacturing society, and if you were on the Ford Motor assembly line in 1915, it's still differences in intellect and so on were important, but they didn't produce 50 for 1 results or 100 for 1 results. Now we're in an economy where specialized talents bring incredible sums, and where if you're a little bit, where you really don't fit well into the market system, you are left behind.
So then the question is, do we need a more inclusive form of capitalism? I know that you and some of the CEOs...
We need a different form of tax. We need an earned income tax credit that's much more that's expanded.
That's going to solve everything? Changing
No,
their
no,
income
nothing
tax?
solves everything.
But does capitalism as we know it need to evolve?
No, capitalism, the market system works. Now, you've got two questions. You want to keep a system where the goose lays more golden eggs every year. We've got that. Now the question is, how do those eggs get distributed? And that is where the system needs some adjusting. We have adjusted. We've voted Social Security, and we've done things in the past. But we need to address the problem, not of how to get more eggs out. We know how to do that. But we have to make sure that in a super rich country, anybody who's willing to work 40 hours a week has a decent living.
Since we last spoke about this over a year ago, the fight for $15 an hour has really elevated. Is that the answer?
You don't need a minimum wage, you need a minimum income. Now, the wage comes to you from your employer. The income,
that's interesting.
Yeah, no, the income comes from your employer plus whatever the government does.
Right.
And the earned income tax credit can give everyone $15 an hour, even if their market skills don't command it. So you don't lose any employment, and you make it graduated, so there still is an incentive that if you're $7.50 an hour job, you get to $9, then your 15 becomes even higher. The earned income tax credit is a great answer, and like I say, it isn't how much you get in wages, it's how much you get in cash.
Why does the onus need to be on the government? Why shouldn't it be on these businesses?
Then you fool with a market system and you lose employment. If you tell me I've got to run a business that pays $15 an hour, in many industries I'm going to employ less people than before. I don't want to employ less people. I just want that person to make $15 an hour. And if you could have a minimum wage that kept everybody in the country working, you'd make it $20 or $25 an hour. We got the money to do it. But that doesn't work because it leaves millions and millions and millions of people who don't have the skills to actually command that in the market. The earned income tax credit solves it. And you would give them a feeling of self-worth, and you wouldn't hurt any jobs. Society would say, we've got enough in this society. So that, if we got an $18 trillion GDP, we can allocate, but right now we're spending about $60 billion a year on it. We can allocate, I don't think it'd take maybe more than another $60 billion to get the job done. We've got 360,000 people working at Berkshire. I think that a very high percentage of the American Dream's alive. American Dream should be that if you work productively at 40 hours a week, you can have a decent life. And some people will have special talents that will make tremendous sums beyond that, and they will be the ones that are responsible for having more eggs, golden eggs to distribute year by year.
Wells Fargo's initial response, because slow. Senator Elizabeth Warren called it gutless leadership, and some have said they put the blame far too much on lower level employees. Did they?
I mean, who knows all the statements they made. I mean, the important thing when you have a problem is get it right, get it fast, get it out, get it over.
So the
and when it's it's the responsibility of the CEO.
How do you get their reputation back? What would your advice be on that front?
You start from where you are and you work forward, and you've got trust to rebuild, and you've got an incredible institution. I mean, in terms of the impact on business, it's minor. I mean, they weren't making any money off the program; they were losing money. So it isn't like something they were doing that was hugely profitable or anything of the sort. But in terms of the people that are there, in terms of outside public, it takes time to restore trust.
Wells Fargo's new account openings have plunged. The stock price has fallen to a 2.5-year low. The SEC is now investigating the Department of Justice, various congressional committees, some states' attorneys general. Do you have faith in Wells Fargo, the institution?
Oh, sure. We do loads of business with Wells Fargo. We have billions of dollars with them. I don't know anything about it, but if I had to guess as whether the deposits would be up a year from now, I guess they'd be up.
Culture has always been something, Warren, that is so important to you.
Huge.
It's huge. It actually, it is at the core of
it's huge.
Why you buy businesses, the culture of the business from the top down.
And changing them is tough.
Was there a flawed culture within the bank?
Well, the very act of not correcting the problem affected the culture. My guess is that the culture, everything I know about it, and I don't claim intimate knowledge, the culture was pretty good, and the incentive system corrupted people. If you leave the petty cash of a large company, you know, right near the door where people leave every day, and just have the petty cash there, you don't bother to buy a safe or anything of the sort, some people are going to succumb to that otherwise would behave pretty well. And when people see other people succumbing to it, they will do it. Cultures shift, and you can affect that culture. You can't affect it in a hurry, but you can turn it for the better or for the worse by your own actions. That's why they put in cash registers. That's how John Patterson sold cash registers. He said, you know, if you've got a cash drawer as opposed to my national cash register, you're going to make people behave worse than they would if if you had the proper safeguards.
Let's talk about the amount of money that John Stumpf has left with. He's left Wells with a $130 million package. He did have $41 million of that compensation clawed back. Is that right?
You can judge whether anybody that runs a business, whether it's right, the amount that they get voted, but the shareholders and the directors put, they have a proxy statement that thick, and if he's earned it, there's probably part of a contract that describes the conditions under which.
Sure.
Yeah.
So outside of the contract, because before in the past you've talked about, what some would deem as excessive compensation packages, and you've said, if I were the American shareholder, I'd get a little bit irritated with these goodbye kisses. Those are your words.
Yeah. I still am, but not. I'm not. That's not in any way related to John Stumpf. I mean, the pay packages of American CEOs have taken very good care of themselves.
5,300 employees don't have a job at Wells Fargo anymore. So for them to see John Stumpf leaving with that amount of money, hard to stomach.
Well, that's been repeated time after time after time in American business. I mean, you looked at thousands of banks, at least hundreds of banks will say that have failed. Did they have clawbacks on any of those?
What do you think the lesson is? Certainly a big, huge lesson learned when you came in to help right the ship at Solomon, back in 91. What's going to be the lesson learned here,
the lesson,
do you think, for the sector?
The lesson is anytime you get any indication that any policy is leading to bad behavior, get on it quickly. And just any problem, when you attack it early. My partner Charlie says, an ounce of prevention isn't worth a pound of cure. He says, an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. You'll make mistakes. And the question is, do those mistakes fester and become a cancer on the organization or anything of the sort? But you better learn to deal with mistakes in business because you're going to make them. I made a lot of them, and that's part of the job. Is not just taking the kudos. Part of your job is learning to deal with mistakes, and frequently they can be mistakes of people under you made, but they are under you, and when you find out about them, you've got to do something about it.
Who's the most driven and focused athlete that you've worked with?
Oh, probably Richie.
Why is that?
He's just an athlete who is a straight out and out athlete. He's just a normal athlete, but he's not a freak. Because of his focus and his sheer desire to be as good as he possibly could be, he's become probably the greatest All Black we've ever had. And that's taken a lot of hard work on his part. His game has continually got better, and even when he's been the best in the world, he's looked for marginal improvements all the time. He hasn't been satisfied to sit still. He's always measured himself against himself as opposed to other people, and I think that's important for young people. It doesn't matter what other people are doing, it's what you do.
A person must never forget the sacrifices our predecessors made, fighting the wars that now give us the freedoms and rights we have.
This man was killed last week in New Guinea.
Daniel, Ryan.
The three men are brothers, sir. I've just learned that this afternoon their mother's going to be getting all 3 telegrams. That's not all. There's a 4th brother, the youngest. He parachuted in with the 101st Airborne night before the invasion. He's somewhere in Normandy. We don't know where.
Is he alive?
We don't know.
Come with me. All four of them were in the same company in the 29th Division, but we split them up after the Sullivan brothers died on the Juno.
Any contact with the fourth son, James?
No, sir. He was dropped about 15 miles inland.
Medic! Medic! We got a medic!
They're tank busters, sir. P-51s.
Angels on our shoulders.
What, sir?
James. Earn this. Earn it.
My dear Mrs. Ryan, it's with the most profound sense of joy that I write to inform you your son, Private James Ryan, is well and at this very moment on his way home from European battlefields. Reports from the front indicate James did his duty in combat with great courage and steadfast dedication, even after he was informed of the tragic loss your family has suffered in this great campaign to rid the world of tyranny and oppression. I take great pleasure in joining the Secretary of War, the men and women of the United States Army, and the citizens of a grateful nation in wishing you good health and many years of happiness with James at your side. Nothing, not even the safe return of a beloved son, can compensate you or the thousands of other American families who have suffered great loss in this tragic war. And I might share with you some words which have sustained me through long, dark nights of peril, loss, and heartache. And I quote, "I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the loved and lost, and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom. Abraham Lincoln." Yours very sincerely and respectfully, George C. Marshall, General, Chief of Staff.
Beautiful.
That's where he belongs.
Home. Where he's always belonged. Things Things are gonna be different now.
You aren't going to say goodbye?
It's never goodbye.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again.
First you both go out your way and the vibe is feeling strong. And what's small turn to a friendship turn to a bond. And that bond will never be broken, the love will never get lost.
Without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again.
Hey, thought you could leave without saying goodbye.
I used to say I lived my life a quarter mile at a time. And I think that's why we were brothers. Because you did too.
I'm gonna go for a drive.
No matter where you are, whether it's a quarter mile away or halfway across the world. The most important thing in life will always be the people in this room, right here, right now.
To a real bond, cause we're brothers first. Cause we're been through a lot, but it ain't over, we gon' keep it.
You'll always be with me.
Change the game without even knowing. How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got? Everything I would do, you were standing there by my side.